Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, a very special guest, returning guest. His name is John Klyczek, last name spelled Klyczek, and he returns to the show. It's been too long. We last spoke a couple times in 2022. One of our earlier shows was about Brave New World, very important book and topic by Aldous Huxley. And we also went over his book, another very important topic. And the title of his book is School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. And we're going to talk about a subject that ties in kind of to both of those subjects, surprisingly. But it's an article he wrote for the great website and publication, Unlimited Hangout. And if you're watching this on Rumble, Rockfin, or X, Twitter, you'll see the full title of it. And it's TrumpED 2025, School Choice, Corporatization, Social Impact Finance, and the Dismantling of the Department of Education. And when I was reading, kind of doing my daily readings, trying to stay informed of all the incredible changes that are happening, I read something this morning about Trump signing something to get rid of the Department of Education and return it to state. So this is something they've been thinking about, and there's a lot of great background information in this article. But John, a.k.a. the Taoist Professor, Klyczek, can tell us more about that. So, John, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, William. Good to be back.
Awesome. So for people who maybe hadn't heard our other two, I'll repost those other shows we've done too after this one. But if people who haven't heard those or maybe not heard your name or your book, maybe you can do a little background, cover your background, your book, and then what led you up to writing this article.
Yeah, so I am a public educator. I'm an adjunct college professor. I teach rhetoric and argumentation. I've been doing that for over a decade now. It might be close to 15 years now. There was a time shortly before Donald Trump got into office the first time where in my state of Illinois, there was a budget crisis. The governor, Bruce Rauner, who's heavily involved in the school choice movement. He's actually sits on the board of one of the think tanks we might talk about today. But he's a Rauner College Prep, was into cradle to career workforce training and all this stuff. And so I saw the budget crisis as sort of a ploy to push public education and other public institutions into private receivership. By the end of that spiel, they did get a voucher bill passed in the state of Illinois. But as I saw things unravel, all the buzzwords that my mentor, who I hadn't met yet, Charlotte Thompson Iserbeat, were popping up, and that was largely the school choice movement and also the ed tech movement sort of coming together. So she wrote the famous book Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which largely focused on the federalization of education, foundation funding going back to almost the founding of the country, certainly as far back as when they imported the Prussian method of education into this system by means of Horace Mann and other members of the Order of Skull and Bones. So what I saw was that basically what was going down was going to be what she pointed out in her book, and also the abridged afterwards. So there's an abridged version, an updated version in which she talks about the school choice movement, talks about charter schools, vouchers, tax credits for tuition. It's basically a privatization scheme. It's a way to push public dollars into private schools, charter schools, which are public or private companies that are publicly subsidized. Also religious schools, and by dint of that, not just corporatizing, basically subsidizing corporations and private entities with public dollars, but also bringing in federal government regulations of private schools and home schools. So that's what kind of got me started in writing about education, and that's kind of how it dovetails with this piece we're going to talk about today.
And this piece is kind of like what I talked about the intro. It's based upon these other thoughts, like this notion of Project 2025 that all the left is up in, hysterics about or whatever, right? So this is kind of part of it, is this idea to reform education, right?
Yeah. And, that was a lot of the feedback I got when I published the article. There was a ton of people that said things like, "Oh, well, Trump doesn't like Project 2025, and he says that he didn't read it and he doesn't want to do it." And Well, that may or may not be the case, but the fact of the matter is close to 30 members of his cabinet or other high-ranking executive officials in his first administration were contributed to Project 2025. Several people on the current administration were contributors to Project 2025. Some of those include Russell Vogt, who's the head of OMB, Ratcliffe, who's the head of the CIA, Homan, who is the border czar, I think Brendan Carr as well, who's the head of the FCC. And, you know, if you take a look at what's laid out in the Project 2025 education chapter, you'll see that much of what is stipulated there has been echoed not only by Donald Trump himself in his Agenda 47, but also in public statements since he's been elected. But also, if you look at, I got a chance to watch Linda McMahon's confirmation hearings, which actually happened the morning that article was published, so they didn't make it into the article. But a couple of the things that they're proposing when they break up or quote unquote dismantle the Department of Education is that essentially they're going to push a bunch of the entitlement fundings and other programs to other departments. Okay, so most of them will go to the Health and Human Services. Others, second place would be Department of Labor, and then other programs would go to Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, Department of State. But when Linda McMahon was questioned about are you gonna end federal entitlements, she said no. When they asked her where the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, where those provisions would, how they were going to meet those provisions, she says, well, I don't know if they wouldn't be better served at HHS, which is what is stipulated in Project 2025. When they asked her how they're going to enforce Title IX, that's the rule that bans gender discrimination in schools. She said, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at the Department of Justice, right? Which is also stipulated in Project 2025. So people that were in his administration before were contributors to it. People that are in his administration now are contributors to it. Everything they're doing with the education chapter is essentially in line with that, both coming out of Trump's mouth and Linda McMahon's mouth. So he can say that he never read it and doesn't know anything about it. But the facts of the matter and the way things are moving appear to be otherwise. Another way to say that was I sort of responded to somebody and said, well, if he didn't read it, I guess he should have, because he doesn't know enough about it then to realize that he's doing the things that he thinks he's against.
Right. It's like a clever dissembling, at least that would be my take of Trump. They're all over. This is a huge document, by the way. For people who don't know, this 2025 is 1,000 pages. And it's replete with all these old kind of paleo conservative types, like really old conservative people, right? I mean, it's literally finished by a guy I just did some research on, Fulner, right? This is the guy who wrote the after, well, he called it Onward. This guy's incredible. This guy's a member of the Knights of Malta, Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. This is a really old school, heavy duty Heritage Foundation founder. So, yeah, I mean, so their plans to get rid of the Department of Education, it sounds good, but it's really more they're going to move that money around in different ways. They're not telling the whole story. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, the Department of Education, first of all, the news that was going around today was he's going to sign an executive order to get rid of the Department of Education. Can't be done. Department of Education is created with act of Congress, must be repealed by an act of Congress. People were basically responding to a headline from the Wall Street Journal. If you actually read it, it specifies in there that it's an executive order that would move things towards the direction of dismantling the Department of Education. And then it stipulates in there, well, yeah, they do actually need an act of Congress. And Linda McMahon has acknowledged as much. But even getting rid of the Department of Education by itself, right, that doesn't get rid of federal involvement in education. All it does is get rid of the bureaucracy, or it's going to shuffle it around. Okay. So basically, all the Department of Education does is administers, oversees, and regulates the entitlement funding that comes from federal education law. Basically, it administers and enforces federal education law. They do have some discretionary block grants that they can hand out, and they do a little bit of research and development so they can incentivize the adoption of certain pedagogies and methodologies at various schools through stuff that they could, programs, R&D at the Institute of Education Sciences and the Regional Education labs. But basically all it does is administer the entitlements. Okay. So if you get rid of the Department of Ed, but you don't repeal all of the federal bills that govern federal education, these being Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Higher Education Act, Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, and then also Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, which is actually more of a Department of Labor program, but it does partner with the Department of Education to do some workforce training, specifically through the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Ed to funnel career pathways for students to basically go into their workforce development programs. So if you just repeal the Department of Education, then those entitlements have to be administered elsewhere. And that's exactly what's stipulated in Project 2025. And I sort of detailed some of the ways that those will be shuffled around. But again, that is not the end of federal involvement in education. I did come across this morning because I was going through the news, reading about the what's going on about he might supposedly sign an executive order. There is another bill in the works to repeal the Department of Education. So I referenced two of them in the article, but there's a third one that I just came onto my radar. It's called the Returning Education to Our States Act. And this one essentially is in line with this as well. So it stipulates that it's going to transfer certain entitlements to HHS. It's going to put some others at the Treasury, but then it's also going to issue some block grant programs. This is the returning education to the states part. They're going to issue some block grants to states, and then they'll have more autonomy over how to administer those block grants. But block grants are not entitlements. So that's an addition. That's an additional funding mechanism. So I need to kind of dig in a little bit deeper on that. But even that bill is essentially in line with what's in Project 2025. They don't mention all of the entitlement funds moving to all of the departments that are listed therein, but some of that may get added to it as they go to committee or as they deliberate and maybe redraft it before it actually goes to vote.
Right. So they're moving it around, and it's an extraordinary amount of money just in the Department of Education. Like, I think it's something like $80 billion a year. But you see these monies being moved around kind of in furtherance of kind of your early book when you spoke about this kind of corporatized technocratic globalization that it's going to actually promote. This isn't kind of like going back to the old red schoolhouse of older times. They're going to implement some of this other stuff, which is in line with a lot of the tech people that are around Trump too. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So the school choice provisions are where sort of a lot of the corporatization will come in to play. And so there's two major moves for school choice reforms that are stipulated in Project 2025. One has to do with taking Title I funds. So these are entitlement funds that are provided for schools that are in impoverished areas, and they want to take a portion of that and give it directly to parents or students, right? Families. And then they can take that ESA money and they can buy quote unquote curriculum materials, quote unquote education therapies, quote unquote personal tutors. There's also another bill that they want to push that's called the Educating Children for Choice Act. And this one is going to allow tax credits for donations to scholarship granting organizations. So whether individuals or corporations put money into these SGOs, and then those SGO corporations, they will dole out the scholarships, and they have authority to decide the provisions for those scholarships. And a lot of these are based on what's called pay for success impact investing. It falls under the umbrella of social impact investing or social impact bonds. So basically what they do is they put money up front to achieve certain outcomes. Usually they're going to be workforce development outcomes. And if they meet those outcomes, then the government will pay them that money back. If they exceed those outcomes, they can get a profit. Some of the impact investment bent of some of these organizations, you could basically say it falls under ESG, so environmental, social, and governance scoring, specifically under the S part, the social part. So in other words, the DEI stuff. One such impact investment or organization or scholarship granting organization that focuses on impact investment is the Point Foundation, and this one emphasizes improved outcomes for LGBTQ BIPOC populations. So if you think that Trump got rid of all the DEI stuff as executive orders, most of them just repeal DEI provisions in other executive orders. Most of those don't have anything to do with education. The ones that do pertain to education don't rescind the DEI provisions in bills like the ESSA, and the ECCA says that the scholarship granting organizations are not bound to any such regulations. So that door is open. And even if they won't, let's say that the woke thing kind of is going by the wayside, there's impact investment corporations, organizations that emphasize impact investments minus the socio-cultural woke stuff. They basically just focus on socioeconomic outcomes, workforce development. Several of these are actually think tanks that are associated either with the advisory board of Project 2025 or some of the authors of the Department of Education chapter of Project 2025. So these would include the American Enterprise Institute. Max Eden, one of the co-authors of Project 2025, is a member there, and he specifically wrote an article about school choice and impact investment. Another think tank is it's called Ed Choice, used to be known as the Milton and Rose Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. The main author of Project 2025 is Lindsay M. Burke. She's a fellow at Ed Choice. She's also high up at the Heritage Foundation, and so is Jonathan Butcher. And the Heritage Foundation is also invested in pay for, I think they call it pay for outcomes. There's plays on pay for success, the human capital bonds, social impact bonds, pay for outcomes. There's, more or less the same idea, maybe a little nuance in the difference in terms of how they're funded. But so those will basically be funneling learning into basically workforce development. So to meet quotas for corporations to meet their workforce outcomes in the fourth industrial revolution. I could go into a little bit about how the ESA subsidize ed tech companies, but I feel like I pause for a second.
Maybe you can define what an ESA is, because it does kind of flow through this article, and it's I think maybe it might be, at least for me, kind of a newer concept, but you can see how complex they're thinking. Like, there's all these acronyms and stuff. It's hard to, at least for me, to follow what they're outlining. You see Pete Thiel in here. Like, this is kind of scary. Like, when you see these outcomes, it's almost like this technocratic data crunching outcomes. Like, it's not like we're going to make a whole person. We're making somebody who's going to fulfill all our statistics as we say it from the top, our definition of what the appropriate statistical outcome of all the, and there's creepy pictures in this article. Let me see if I can find one. Like, there's these happy kids with things around their head. It's like Star Trek, inner balance, brain technology, implantables, neuroprosthetics. Like, whoa, but maybe you can define what an ESA is.
Yeah. So the school choice movement, right? You can break it into two categories. One is the charter schooling movement. Okay. So private companies that are subsidized by public dollars. Then there's this basket of funding mechanisms that are known as school choice funding mechanisms. And that's what is largely the emphasis this time around, because by the way, if you think that school choice is a Republican thing, the concept of charter schools was coined by Albert Shanker, who was a Democrat and the president of the American Federation of Teachers Union. The first federal charter school bill was passed by Bill Clinton. Okay, but the charter school movement is basically locked in. Now we need to basically bring everything else under the school choice corporate government system through these other funding mechanisms. So there's education savings accounts, or ESAs, there's vouchers, and then there's tax credits. What makes an ESA unique from the voucher or the tax credit is that the ESA is basically a pool of funds that the the family can basically spend in a more personalized manner. So with the vouchers, you're going to get money up front, and that you can take that voucher to any participating school, right? That is authorized under the voucher program. And you could go and take it to those other private schools. Maybe it's another public school nearby, or it's charter school. That's what you can do with a voucher. Tax credit, same idea, except you're going to pay up front. ESAs is, instead of here's a voucher for specifically for tuition, ESAs can be used for a wide range, can be used for tuition, but it can also be used for some of those other products that I mentioned. So it could just be used for supplementary ed, right? Maybe you like your public school, but you want some supplementary services for your child. So maybe it could be education therapies is one of the provisions that you could use it for. Maybe it's personal tutoring, right? Now, some of this, it could be, right, for curriculum materials. It could be maybe just like textbooks, right? For education therapies, maybe it's a speech therapist. Okay. For personal tutors, maybe it's a human being that's sitting down with you and going over your paper with you. But very much so, it could also be contracting with what they call the ed tech vendors. So your curricular materials could be what are known as cognitive behavioral adaptive learning courseware. It's the digital version of BF Skinner's teaching machine. So they data mine students' psychometrics in order to streamline them either into advanced curriculum or remediation. So if they do really good at the module and they do it efficiently, it'll expedite them, right, to higher learning. But if they're not so good or maybe too slow, right, it'll remediate them. Okay. And then that will determine their career pathway, right? And that will funnel them into that would be also funded by the PFS scholarships, or could be funded by the PFS scholarships. The education therapies, right? Those could be, again, maybe could be just a counselor, but it could also be a social emotional learning biofeedback wearable. So you mentioned those heart math wearables there, or the EEG wearables there. So it could be a heart math wearable that they actually use these at the wellness center at one of the schools where I teach. You put this thing on, you do a trademark breathing meditation that's supposed to help you manage your test anxiety. Some of those brainwave headbands. Well, there was once upon a time a company called NeuroCore. I'm pretty sure it's defunct. I can't find it. But it was once invested in by Betsy DeVos. I believe she was on the board of the directors or the board of trustees. And that NeuroCore EEG, the brainwave reader, that was to be used to help students with ADHD. Okay. But education therapies could also be that cute little thing, if you scroll down just a little bit, that Moxie robot, which could also double as a personal tutor. So the Moxie, that is known as a social emotional learning robot. It supposedly is designed for people who are on the autism spectrum. So it's supposed to help them identify and parse emotions and facial expressions. And they're supposed to be able to take those skills they learn from interacting with the robot and transfer it over to human relationships. So that could be a therapeutic robot, but it could also just be an academic tutoring robot. In addition, that could also be like some of the GPT. OpenAI is offering a GPT personal tutor. There's some of the links in that bullet. If you go to them, you can actually see some of these other products that I'm mentioning. And another one would be Conmigo. Conmigo is a GPT AI tutor that I believe that piloted the large language model was built on OpenAI algorithms. But Conmigo is facilitated by Khan Academy. Khan Academy has been financed by Elon Musk. And I should have noted that some of the cognitive behavioral adaptive learning courseware products, such as Clever and Newton, those have been bankrolled by Peter Thiel. And a neat little thing that I learned writing this article is that one of the first online virtual charter school corporation, which was set up by founding chairman William Bennett, who was the Secretary of Education. He took over the mantle of something called Project Best, Basic Education Skills Through Technology. That's what my mentor, Charlotte Thompson Iserbeat, leaked to the public when she worked in the Department of Education under Ronald Reagan. And this K-12 Inc. that was set up by Bennett, that the original funding, a lot of it came from Larry Ellison. right? And so what you have behind sort of this virtual online corporate school choice ESA industry with all the ed tech products that will plug into these virtual online charter schools that will be the bulk of what ESAs are spent on, because you're not going to be able to, the amount of money you're getting, it's not going to cover the tuition for Groton or Dalton. Okay. Most likely there's not going to be another option very nearby that's okay. So the bulk of those ESA funds is going to go to the supplementary education. And if you're in an impoverished neighborhood and you have transportation problems, what options do you have other than virtual online stuff that can plug in all these different wearables and devices to get all the data that people like Peter Thiel and his Palantir and Larry Ellison with his vision of having AI nodes watch everything everybody does all the time. You can see how this is all part of, this is just the educational end of sort of the cybernetic panopticon that has been being put in place for some time.
Wow, that's really sinister. So the educational savings accounts, like for example, so if you say you're not going to public school and you don't get a voucher, then they'll give you money, stick in the account, but you're only going to have certain ways to spend it. What you're saying is that you're going to be funneled into these groups, just like you said. The poor people will get this. It's obviously not for the rich people because they can pay, like you said, for private ed. So this is definitely directed to lower income, lower middle income people, and there's going to be this preset solution, whether it comes from Musk, Ellison, or Thiel. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And so the next article I'm looking at, I'm working on already, I'm going to look at the use of fintech to administer the ESAs. And this idea has been pitched by many of the think tanks that are in the orbit of Project 2025 and the people that contributed to it. But it's also just one of them that's most noteworthy is Jonathan Butcher. Right? He's one of the Heritage guys. It's one of the co-authors of Project 2025. And he wrote a piece for Heritage where he's looking at the use of fintech stuff, basically digital wallets, things like Class Wallet or Benefit Wallet. There's other products as well to administer the ESAs. And the pitch is it'll prevent, well, they don't say waste, fraud, and abuse, but that's the mantra, right? It's basically fraud. They want to prevent parents from spending those funds on things that are not authorized. And they say, well, we had some, we used to have this, the parents pay up front, and then we'd audit it, and then we'd reimburse stuff that fell into the right categories. But a lot of parents didn't have the money for that up front. So then we gave out these debit cards, and they were programmed with certain pricing codes and categories, so they could only buy certain things. But some of those categories were kind of vague. So like if you were to go to Walmart to get some school supplies, it was hard to tell whether or not how you're actually spending that money at Walmart. Okay. And so they're like, well, the fintech, right? It'll be hooked up like the Class Wallet will have you'll have the digital wallet, and it'll interface through basically the department ESA funds and sort of a digital market, like a sort of an Amazon that Class Wallet or whatever product you're using will facilitate. And so there you can ensure that, first of all, that everything that it goes through is going to, right? It's going to be locked into that platform. It's going to fall under the code, but they kind of toy around with the idea of using blockchain, right? And blockchain would be, right, even more of a more efficient or more exhaustive accounting measure. And so if you think of, right, who's behind the Trump administration, basically the PayPal mafia, right? Your Elon Musk, your Peter Thiel, and then the people in that orbit. We're talking about, he wants to make, Trump says he wants to make the United States the crypto capital of the world, the AI capital of the world. And so as we're
$500 billion for Stargate. Holy smokes. That's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Ellison, right? Oh, geez. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. But so all that ed tech data, I think will feed into the Stargate project. But as far as this fintech stuff, I think that this is also going to be part of I think they're going to push for some form of a digital currency during the Trump administration. I mean, we kind of see him already kind of gearing up for that. One of the excuses will be all this, oh, we found all this waste, fraud, and abuse. So if we put everything on a public ledger, on a distributed ledger technology, a blockchain, then we can, we'll have everything. The public can see it. We'll be able to track it. We'll know where every coin goes. And so I think part of that this ESA thing is just one of the tentacles of what's going to be a financial overhaul coming relatively soon.
Right. So you see this financial element in here, tons of money, tons of things, but your kind of view is this is just kind of the right wing's influence into all this stuff. Koch, state policy. I mean, the Koch brothers, right? For people who don't know, this is kind of all this stuff is going to be rolled out. Like, it's incredible. And they have like 180-day like rollout. So we're only in the 45th day of this presidency. So
yeah,
certain stuff's happening very soon. It's not over the horizon, right?
Yeah, and I'll note that another reason why I never bought it. I kind of seen the tides shifting early last year, and I figured this was going to be the thing on the plate. So everybody wants they want a respite from all the craziness the last 4 years. So nobody wants to hear anything about how Trump's not going to save them. So I said, well, I'm just going to wait till he puts something on the table. So that way, when I write this piece, I can at least point to, okay, I know he's denying it, but look at what he's doing. The reason I didn't buy it from the get-go was, Charlotte told me that when you're if you're part of the Republican administration, when the president gets elected, it doesn't matter what department you're in. If you're part of the executive, you get a Heritage Foundation playbook on day one, right? The Heritage Foundation basically is the policy-making arm of the Republican Party. It's been that way essentially ever since it's been around. And
76, I think. It's like a crazy long, like 50 years old.
Yeah, it's almost 50. I think, or it might be a little bit more than 50, but it's 70s, early 70s, right? And look, it was that way when she was there. I'm sure it was that way when he was there. And another reason why I'm confident that it was that way when he was there, because one of the people that was on board with the Reagan administration was Edwin Meese, right? Well, he was also on the transition team for Trump, and he's a Heritage guy. So I'm pretty sure
Meese is still around. I can't even believe that. That was like a name from like forever.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Yeah, I didn't know Edwin Meese was still around.
Yeah. No. Well, when I saw Ed Fulmer, I thought the same thing. I didn't realize he's still around. But one thing that all these guys have in common, Ed Fulmer, Meese, and then also the guy that founded, one of the founders of Heritage, Paul Weyrich, right? Paul Weyrich, right? These people are all members of the Council for National Policy as well, right? And not Meese, the not Fulmer, the other guy that I just said,
Weyrich,
yeah,
Fulmer,
Weyrich, yes, Weyrich. So
just a lot of names to keep on. Keep
Council for National Policy, Heritage Foundation, also American Legislative Exchange Council. American Legislative Exchange Council is on the advisory board of Project 2025. There's several, it was involved. So for people that don't know, it's a sort of a consortium of lobbyists and lawyers who write boilerplate legislation that they then send out to state legislatures. And basically all their bills aim towards privatization. All right. And as far as the school choice movement, the corporate charter schooling movement, the virtual charter schooling movement, ALEC has been at the forefront of that. Betsy DeVos has been an ally and associate of ALEC. So has the guy that I mentioned earlier, William Bennett as well. So, essentially, and all of these organizations are part of the State Policy Network, which is a consortium of think tanks, neoconservative, beltway libertarian think tanks, largely funded by dark money from the Koch brothers. So this includes, I mentioned, American Legislative Exchange Council, Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, Ed Choice, also the America First Policy Institute, which Linda McMahon was the chair of. So, the people behind the Project 2025 document, and they're by extension the people behind the education reforms that Trump's pushing, right? This isn't, people think that MAGA is like this new brand of republicanism. Not as far as I can see, right? I mean, if we're just looking at sort of the people in his orbit, I mean, this is old school Republican swamp stuff, right? Going back to at least the 70s.
Wow, yeah, really incredible. Even with Fulner's name on this thing, like these guys are, I don't even know if paleo is the right word. These are like ancient conservatives. I think Mises 93, like he's been around forever. But to see them kind of pop back, I wonder, what do you think? Like, you're going to see this kind of techno change. I think you indicated that in your article. That's happening. But what do you think this kind of old school view is? I mean, we had pretty intense things happening in the public school system. What do you think this? I mean, I guess Trump is made DEI, or I call it DIE, illegal. But like, what do you think the cultural change, other than the impact of the technocratic stuff? What do you think the other cultural changes do you think will be, or what do you foresee in the near and long term?
Well, I mean, I think that one thing I would note here is that, because you kind of noted like moving that this old guard Republican kind of this Koch brothers swamp is sort of facilitating the rise of the oligarchs, the tech bros, right? Well, Peter Thiel was the speechwriter for Bill Bennett. Okay. And so, right, they go way back. Okay. And Peter Thiel also funded, or he started, was it Stanford Review? Is it basically a conservative paper?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So he's kind of going way back. He's kind of priming the culture for sort of this, right of center, pseudo libertarian kind of,
and a Bilderberg steering committee person. So if that doesn't make you nervous, I don't know what would.
Yes, and that's why people are so to the DEI thing is a nice segue there. I think a lot of the cultural stuff that's the consolation prize, right? So you drove people crazy with CRT and gender ideology and all things that fall under the banner of woke. So now, right, as long as you can tell people that, oh, we got rid of some DEI, they won't think too hard about what they're getting in replace, right? I think DEI is kind of like, it's like this catch-all is kind of like, I smell some DEI over in that program. Elon, get the chainsaws, and then they just go, right, and they get carte blanche to dismantle the social safety net, or what's left of anything that actually holds these oligarchs back, right? So that's kind of what I see moving in that direction. But it's funny, I this is a nice segue because Peter Thiel, Bilderberg Steering Committee. Who else is on Bilderberg Steering Committee? Stacey Abrams, the one that's like, oh, she got this money from USAID, and it's like, yeah, right, I know. So I mean, you think we're gonna find any of the money that maybe Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or maybe Alex Karp, another Bilderberg guy, right? Like these are
right.
These
what did they get from
out.
USAID? Right. What makes you assume that only the USAID money went to left-leaning or leftist organizations? Like, what about the right? They're never going to self-expose themselves if they got cash. And we know that Musk and Thiel live off of government grants and contracts or whatever. Like that's their
yeah, right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So we're going to get more state education. So that may be the real fist inside the conservative velvet glove, is we're going to tell you what to think from our perspective now, and maybe you don't get as much liberty and as much choice as they're telling you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, that's the danger of the ESAs. So basically what happens there is, people, especially for the families that are homeschooling now because they didn't want to send their kids to the lockdown facilities, right, and have them masked up and wrapped in plastic sheets and stuff, right? And then they saw all the crazy woke stuff. So, right, they took their kids out, they bring them home to homeschool. Well, if you take that money, right, your home is no longer an escape hatch. Your home is now, you're bringing with it the federal regulations, bringing with it the government's ability to basically control what you do, not just in terms of curriculum. Like, so if you look at some of the state laws that the federal ESA is in Project 2025 are based upon, one of them is the Alabama State Choose Act. And if you look at that one, you'll see that it stipulates that when you take that ESA money, you have to comply with all of the particular regulations stipulated by the department, including health code regulations. So if you took out because you didn't want them to get the sticky, that would be the case. They would tell you, well, if you want your homeschool money, you want your ESA money for your, whatever it is, your curriculum materials, your personal tutors, whatever, that you'll have to have your sticky, right? You'll have to have that. So
so it's one of 10 ESA laws. So they're all doing that too, right? It's not just Alabama. Well, they're intending to do that.
Yeah, I just use that one as a case study. Now, if somebody can find me a state where they don't actually tie any regulations to it, please send it to me. I'm not aware of any. But even if that's the case, there is I wish I had the document in front of me because I always forget. I think it's Phi Delta Kappan, I think is the organization, wrote a piece on, Charlotte used to rail about this one all the time when, it's sort of her go-to to explain why you don't want vouchers, ESAs, etc. So the first experiment with putting public funds in private schools was in Vichy, France. All right. And what happened was, for people who don't know, right, Vichy, France, this Nazi territory at one point, right? So they basically created for lack of a better term, whatever, they might use the term vouchers, but they were providing public funds to private schools, in particular religious schools. And then a few administrations later, a far left-wing guy gets in and they're like, oh, we can't, if you're a religious school or a private school and you take public funds, well, you're now under our control. Like, you have to, right? We're going to come in and regulate what you're doing. And that's what happened. So even if, right, this first round looks like it's, minimal strings attached, all you got to do is get the next administration in. And then basically you have one system, one ubiquitous public-private system. Right. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're in a private school or a public school or a homeschool, you are all beholden to the same federal regulations.
Wow. It's really kind of well crafted too. It has like cute little acronyms about freedom and choice and those types of things all through there. But it's really public-private for people who may not be aware. It's like a euphemism for fascism. Like I'm not going to go like capital F fascism, but it's really the state power over the individual, which, it's a direct contravention what they're thinking of, like returning it to the states. They're really not returning it to the states. Right. It's a lie, right? Right.
And even in the bill that I looked at today, okay, so those block programs, those block grant programs, that's the part where you're going to return some kind of autonomy to the states. Well, first of all, it's still federally funded. Okay. But there's three things you agree to when you take those block grants. One is that you submit student data to the Treasury. The other one is the annual audits by the Treasury. And then you have to comply with all federal civil rights laws. Okay. So again, right.
It's sort of everything. Yeah.
I'm not sure
it's
how
that's not unencumbered. It's encumbered by other provisions. That's like another trick. So they'll rope you into other things that they want to do by seeding you something that has a sugar coating. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. The last chapter, the last section there, the concluding section, the editor changed it to pick your poison. I had choose your poison. It was supposed to be a play on choice, like school choice, right? Choose your poison, right? In other words, bottom line is, well, you get choices, but the choices, you don't get to choose your choice. You don't get to decide what are the options to choose from. You get to choose from, would you like all government, all corporate, or would you like a mix of corporate and government, right? That's what it is. It's
the mix is probably the worst. I don't know. It seems
no,
more
definitely
cynical.
the worst is the homeschool where you take in the virtual online charter school and all the ed tech apps that data mine you for these companies while the government sticks its nose in your house, right? I mean, that's 100% the worst one.
Wow,
right? And in the meantime, you're subsidizing, people like Elon Musk that want to take a chainsaw to anything that might be a social safety net or some kind of guardrail from these people doing whatever they want. I thought it would be a neat little thing to note here, since we're talking about, choices that aren't real choices, and right and left kind of maybe not being on different sides of the aisle.
Maybe it's state anti-state is the real question, right? Like you're still going to get the state. You're going to get a state with a different camouflage.
Yeah. Have you heard of have you ever heard of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft?
I'm afraid, but no, I'm glad I haven't.
I stumbled onto this thing when I was doing my research on, the Koch network and all this. This was created in 2019, so while Trump was in office. It's known as a transpartisan action tank, and it was funded by the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Charles Koch Foundation. And there's this article, the headline is something like, "Can George Soros and Charles Koch team up to save the world?"
Wow, that's like dystopia, dude. That's like a funny, like almost comedic black comedy dystopian statement.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like the butcher himself right there, freaking Anthony Blinken. Like he's filled the graves of like 1 million people. That's the last guy I want involved in anything. I don't care if it's education or what.
And the other usual suspects are involved as well. Just so you know, we're not going to leave them out. You got Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, and Ford Foundation. Right, so everybody's there. It's a big part. What did Carlin say? It's a big tent, and you're a big club, and you ain't part of it.
I love the quote here on their thing: "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy." My follow-on would be, "You don't have to go abroad because the monsters are all here."
Yeah, right.
Rockefeller Foundation is like they funded so much nonsense like this. Sounds like it. John, we are at the 45-minute mark. It's great to talk with you again. Great information. And it's important for people to be a little bit more wary and suspect, about some of these things. Like they always present themselves as doing some kind of benefit, but this is like, these are encumbered by other regs. There's other hidden things. And imagine like, I'm going to homeschool my kid, but here you go, Johnny, it's 9 a.m. Put on your biomedical monitoring device for 8 hours. So Elon Musk and Pete Thiel can figure out how to even, think about the dual use reverse programming of that. Like, oh, Johnny's really responding to this history. Let's give him more of that, more BS. Like they can just then even craft and tailor. That's the whole thing about data analysis that's scary, is they just keep crafting stuff to you through algorithms or AI that is very coercive. So anyway, maybe you can just kind of follow up, maybe tell people where you can get the article, where they can reach out to your book, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so you can get the article at Unlimited Hangout. That's where you're going to find all my most recent stuff. If you go to my website, that's schoolworldorder.info. That will have links to the book and all my social media. You can get the book at tryingday.com, also available on Amazon. Social media, main one that I actually pay a lot of actual attention to is my Twitter. So that's Dallas Professor on Twitter or X. I'm also on Telegram. I don't go on there a whole bunch, but those are you can find all those links on schoolworldorder.info.
Schoolworldorder.info. So I'll put a link to your Unlimited Hangout articles. I got to catch up with you because you've done a lot of stuff on Barbara Marx Hubbard, who I've been following. So I got to read those. Then your book, and then also you're active on X Twitter. So I'll put links to all that stuff. But today I'm going to re-upload what we did from 2022. But today we talked about TrumpED 2025, school choice, corporatization, social impact finance, and the dismantling of the Department of Education. Again, the guest is John Klyczek, Klyczek. CZEK. And thanks so much for your time, John. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Dana.